Mukesh.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Sheikh, how are you?
Hey, so far good. How you doing?
Thanks for joining.
Of course, pleasure. Thank you for putting together this.
Okay, like in 1 minute we can start. We have a good number of people attending now. Okay, yeah, maybe you can remove the picture.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So colleagues, I think we can start. So thank you all for attending. It's the first NOMMO special event. And I want to thank you, but also to say Happy New Year, even though we are in February. It had been a very difficult 2025. We are starting the 2026 with more expectation that it's going to be smoother. And we wanted to start this series of discussions by reflecting on 2025 and see how what we can take from 2025 to 2026 and going forward. And we thought that there wouldn't be a better panel than the one that we have put in place. With sharing that I don't need to present, UN Ombudsman, part also of Unario and NOMMO, Nadine, I don't need to present. Also used to be the chairperson of Unario before becoming NOMMO. And Nicholas, of course, part of Unario, but also NOMMO now. So this discussion will focus on people that are already in the network. We have enough resources to facilitate a number of discussions that are in the pipeline. And all those discussions are coming from the annual conferences where the colleague had decided to have those special discussions in addition to the case debrief. And I would like to recognize and to thank someone who's been working hardly to put this in place. It's Tina. Tina is here with us today. And Tina will have the privilege also to facilitate the discussions. And we're going to have the team to rotate very often in facilitating these discussions on these topics. I want to thank also Iya. We don't know Iya. Iya is our intern. She's been the one at the back facilitating the technical aspect. So without, I think we can move to go now to the panel discussion. I don't know, Tina, if you want to say something before.
Thank you, Sofa. This is the inaugural meeting of the topic of discussion, which actually came out from our meeting in Manila. And thank you, Khalid, for being the chair last year. I see that you're on this call, and also for Wayne and Arlene for hosting. During our conversation in Manila, there was so many rich discussions that we had, so many great suggestions for topics, and we just didn't have the time. And so this idea came from us wanting to continue having these conversations, to be able to talk together and do a deep dive. And so this is what NOMMO will be doing throughout the year. To begin with, what we'd like to do for this next section is what we're going to call the retrospective. So I'd like to ask each of our panelists to identify one unexpected win that you had last year. It was a incredible year that we had, a very challenging year. So if you could talk just about 4 minutes about one win that you had that's unexpected, and also one persistent friction point, a challenge that you had when you think back to 2025. So we'll do this as a first part of our discussion, and then we'll go into some questions and answers. And perhaps I can ask Shireen if you can start us off. Shireen, you're wearing a lovely red jacket. I can see you on the screen. So thank you.
I'll have to remember that next time to kind of wear a muted gray or something. Well, good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure and privilege for me to see all your smiley faces. We don't get to connect that often, so I think these opportunities are great. Thank you for asking me to participate, Yusofa. And you are correct. 2025 was a challenging year. I would disagree on one point. I'm not sure the challenge has gone away. But
That's true.
you know, when I think about 2025 and the persistent friction point, two things come to mind. And one is staff looked more for coercive ways of expressing power. There was a lack of civility, a lack of respect in the way they communicated. And I don't think it was necessarily their intent or they wanted to be heavy-handed, but somehow that felt faster and cleaner, and maybe they get more concrete results. And so that was the recurring theme. People just were angry about things that were affecting them, and they expressed themselves very aggressively, very negatively. And before you could even move into something positive, you had to get them down off that ledge. you know. And so I think that that still exists. I mean, I think that has not gone away. We had in the Secretariat, the SG had his town hall last week. I was appalled at the lack of respect and some of the tone of the comments in the chat. So I think that is something. The other thing I think that maybe even fueled some of this is there was an increasingly transactional approach to conflict resolution. You know, a lot of the communications, while we communicated a lot, the organization, it was transactional. It lacked that human empathy in the communications. And mediation was more readily declined because it was perceived that there wasn't a lack of really negotiating space. So those were the 2 points about persistent fiction. And the unexpected win. I talked to some of my team about these questions too and got feedback from them. And across the board, they were somewhat surprised at how positive visitors responded when we offered a different path, a collaborative agency rather than a confrontation. There was a high level of appreciation and enthusiasm for the conflict coaching methodology of embracing conversations. And I think that even in high pressured environments, people don't want more power over others. What they want is more agency for themselves. And they want it in a way that preserves relationships, dignity, and legitimacy. So I think if we continue down that path, we will continue to be effective in how we deal with conflict resolution. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Shireen, for that. Um, Nicholas, perhaps I could ask you to go next.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so pleased to be here and honored. So I should give the context in my response to surprising things last year. That last year was my first year at the Inter-American Development Bank, and so my observations are kind of building on things that have been really put in place by my group here, and also I want to recognize Ellen, my predecessor, who made it very easy for me to come into this group. So there are a few things, as I think about kind of the surprising things. One is that I think that the fact that in this office was already on the pathway to this when I joined, but being a bit more proactive and thinking about preventative measures for engaging with employees of the IDB. For example, there are two programs. I may talk a little bit more about these later, but training programs that have been established around neuroscience, and also a first aid program, first aid for conflict resolution. Also, what we were describing as we started the year as our anti-harassment services, which we're now calling Respectful Workplace, and thinking about how we can be proactive in getting in early to resolve things that we don't, I guess it's in nobody's interest for them to end up in the ethics office. So, so taking those more proactive, preventative stances, I think has been really well received. And I'm not sure if it's so surprising, but it's gratifying to see that those are well received and gaining traction. In relation to the friction point, I guess there are two things that come to mind. I was initially thinking about kind of confusion around our services and kind of confusion between our office and other offices. When do I go here or there? And I don't think that's anything new. I think that's something that probably most offices, most organizations face frequently. But even recently in a meeting with HR, somebody said, well, when you represent a person, right, wait, we don't represent anybody. So there's some fundamental things we're still trying to work to clarify. But Shireen, I also want to, something you said a moment ago just really resonated with me, thinking about not so much our office, but the environment within IDB, and how during this past year with shifts externally in our environment, I think there's a lot of fear. People are being super cautious about what they say and how they engage. And I find that both at the professional level in the organization, uncertainty, but also people living in this area who are worried about their families and worried about just being from outside the U.S., being working and living in the U.S. and how the dynamics have shifted. So that's, I think, an added layer. Trying to be diplomatic in how I describe this, but I think it's a significant shift for people who work for IDB.
Thank you, Nicholas. And Nadine, please, thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm really excited and honored. So I just want to thank you all for putting this program together. And NOMMO, I'm just very excited to be part of this event. I would say that the surprise for me last year was that our caseload doubled. Despite all that was going on in the inner and outer environment. It was at one point, I felt like, it was like every time we turned around, we were getting new cases. So to give you all an idea of what that looked like, we went from 75 cases to 153. And our caseload for mediation is still high. So despite the fear that is real, I think for many people, our staff are still using mediation at a very high rate at the World Bank. So I'm very pleasantly surprised about that. I think some of that has to do with our efforts to decentralize our office. So we now have mediators in Morocco, Ghana, and in Colombia. I think at least 2 or 3 of them are here. So that has been wonderful being able to be on the ground. The other thing that I have found is that there's a very high level of anxiety in the institution, and it's directly impacting staff. I am seeing more cases of people who appear to be very mentally on edge. I'm not a psychologist, but we're seeing a lot of anxiety and stress, more people going out on medical leave, which I think is a direct result of the uncertainty that's in the system. So I do think the trigger points are the geopolitical environment that we're in, as well as the internal environments, which, whether we like it or not, sometimes reflect some aspect of that for good and for bad. And also, I think the fact that many of our staff are on G4 visas and the impact of job loss, or the fear of job loss, and the reality of what that will mean for them and their families is also a friction point. We're not seeing people speaking out. To the contrary, they're speaking less. And I think some of that has to do with the uncertainty and fear that we're seeing. But there's a lot of good work that we're continuing to do. The other very pleasant, nice, not really surprise, but something I've shared with you all. At the World Bank, we've launched what's called our Navigator or Ask EIJ function, which is part of our vice presidency. And what has been wonderful is that a lot of staff are going there. It's more of a triage station. So if you don't know where to go, they will guide you in where to go. And literally hundreds of staff have gone to them during their inaugural year to get advice on where to go. And that program, or that function, also is supplemented by our Respectful Workplace Advisor program, which the World Bank formed, I think, about 15 or 20 years ago. So we're very excited about that. So without rambling, those are just a few things that I think are noteworthy that I've seen. But I cannot underestimate the impact of the external environment on staff, I think, in all of our organizations.
Thank you, Nadine. And you are making a good transition to the next question. And before that, I want to maybe inform colleagues that the first part is recorded, but not the question later. But we'll see after the report if you want to use it or not, based on the agreement from the panelists. Nadine, you said about the case load that become multiplied by 2. And congratulations to you and your team. My question on that, I believe one aspect is because also you decentralize, but was there some specific aspect in the caseload that you could see that was at increase in terms of issues, for instance?
Oh, thank you for your question. We did see a lot of cases that involved ending employment, which is not a surprise given the environments that we're working in. So that was our top category, ending employment, non-renewal of contracts. We also had cases around interpersonal conflict, no surprise there, and also some cases on employment contract as well. So those were the primary areas. I think that
to answer your question, I do believe another reason our cases have gone up is we have made concerted efforts to collaborate with internal stakeholders. So, for example, we have what's called an early collaboration initiative, which Sonair is leading. I think many of you know him. And the purpose of that program or that initiative is for us to further strengthen our relationship with HR, particularly the HR business partners who are often the first point of contact for employment cases. So we're doing work with that. Another area that we're looking at is restorative dialogue. So we're looking to partner with investigations as well as peer review services to see whether or not we can offer help to individuals who go through formal processes and have strained relationships as a result of that. So I think being agile, being willing to be creative in our offerings, I think has led to an increase in our cases, but it's also led to stronger relationships. We also work very closely with our staff association, and they refer many cases to us, and they participate as representatives in mediation. The other thing I think is really critical is to clearly define mediation versus ombuds. I think one thing the World Bank has done a very good job with is avoiding the merger of the processes. And I know that not every institution is as large as the World Bank or has the latitude to do that. So I'm very sensitive to that. And this is not a judgment. It's really something to be mindful, particularly when you're in a budget constrained environment. There could be a tendency to try to blend us together and to take away the value that each function plays. So I think the fact that we've been able to maintain our independence as an independent function has also helped us when it comes to creating clarity for our clients so they're not confused as to what our role is.
Excellent. Thank you very much for all these lessons learned.
Thank
I
you.
think they can be applied to many institutions around the table today. But I'm thinking about sharing what you said about the anger that you are noticing, the lack of empathy, the transactional nature of processes that I think also most of us are also seeing in this process. And I believe, Shirin, you have an increase of cases, but not the luxury to have more staff like Nadine could have in region. You have less while you're having more cases and more people angry and less empathy demonstrated. How did your team manage to maintain the impartiality, the neutrality, when you have such human dimensions involved in this very difficult situation? I see it like a human crisis in many situations.
I think I, can piggyback on some of the things Nadine said. Our caseload increased significantly, and we were seeing the same thing. Ending of jobs, non-renewal of a contract, interpersonal issues. And I think for us, we always fall back on the principles, and neutrality being the biggest one. And we do what we do best. We listen to people. We're the place they come, they feel safe, they feel heard, and they don't feel judged. And when we do that, it gives them the opportunity to let out all of the things that they're feeling. And we pay attention to the process, the effect it's having on the staff, and try to give them some agency to be able to deal. I also I have a great deal of concern about my own staff. As ombudsmen and mediators, you hear and you take in a lot. And we have to practice self-care first. So, I said to my team the other day when we had our global team meeting, you all already give me 150%. You make me look good. You keep the trust in the office at a very high level. I am not asking you for more. We may have standard operating procedures that say you've got to reply within 24 hours, see them within 48. We can't do that anymore. I still want you to acknowledge a request within 48 hours, but you can't possibly see everybody according to that standard. But the key to it is communication. Communicate with the visitor that you'll be able to see them, but it will be 3 days from now, 4 days from now. We can only do the best we can do, and we need to stick to our principles. And sometimes that's hard because you get overwhelmed about the stories. But we work closely with the administration to understand what is UN 80, how is it being applied, what are the rules, so that we can communicate to staff what is going on, where it's coming from, and help them see it's not personal. All offices, including mine, got a financial cut. We're cut some positions. Okay, so that's, I think, how we deal with it. Being honest, showing empathy, and communicating in a way that they feel heard, they feel safe, and they don't feel judged.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Erin. Tina, you want
So-
it? Yeah?
Yes, thank you. And I think we've all had this very difficult year. And I know for Yusofa and our team, when we were reflecting on it, we had thought about what did we take away from it? And I know that through the challenges that we faced together, we felt that were able to maintain some of the resiliency and perhaps even become anti-fragile. And Nicholas, if I could ask you, how did you feel about this past year with the team? Do you feel that your team had developed different survival mechanisms that helped it go through the year? So, like, your thoughts on that? Thank you. Oops, you're muted, Nicholas.
Sorry about that. I was making a little joke about the fragility of my ego remains, but I think that it's so important. We in our office, we've been very fortunate at IDB so far that there haven't been drastic organizational changes. But I think we have had an increase in our cases. I think about 25% more mediation cases and 10% increase in our ombuds cases. But I think, when I came into this office a year ago, I was very fortunate to be welcomed into this group. And we have quite a mutually supportive team. And I've seen that in many situations throughout this past year that, where we have of course, the pressures of work, but also then we're also managing our own personal life things, events that come up. And I've found that, that it's being able to, in almost every staff meeting, when people are talking about the work that they're doing, another person is saying, how can I help with that? What can I do? How can I contribute? And so the ability to have that strong team dynamic, I think is really crucial for individual resilience. So there's that. And if anything, one of the things that we need to kind of work against in our office is over collaboration. So it's a good problem to have. But just thinking about how we can support each other, but also have the clarity about our individual projects. Beyond that, when I'm thinking about resilience for this office, something that we've just started working on is a strategic plan for our services. And I like to think about our work as being a small business within a larger business, because it's so important as far, and especially with the changing environment around us, thinking about what is the problem that we're here to solve. What is the purpose of our office? What's the mission? What's our vision for what we want to be? And it's always helpful for me to think about how we can prioritize what we're doing. Because, and again, this is another strength of our team, is that we have a million ideas of great things that we can do. And I'm sure this, actually, the engagement that my colleagues have had with Unario and NOMMO, I think speak to that as well. We're always thinking about what we can do. So one of the challenges that we have is kind of refining that and making sure that the initiatives that we have are in alignment with what people need throughout the organization, and being able to very strategically align those things and narrow them. I'll just mention two quick things that, and thanks to our UN and World Bank colleagues, as well as IMF, and also we're connected with Mars, the Mars Corporation, in doing a benchmarking exercise on our own processes and policies. We're just coming to the conclusion of that exercise now. And then we're embarking on a new project with the Harvard Negotiation Mediation Clinical Program. It's part of Harvard Law School, to do an evaluation of our office and the services that we provide, and satisfaction with the office. So we'll be conducting a full organizational survey just about the ombuds and mediation services. And this is all because we want to be well positioned to, first of all, know how we're doing. I feel we're getting very strong feedback, but we want to be well positioned to make sure that if we're not reaching people who need us, right now we can measure satisfaction with the people who use the office. There's this whole population of people who don't use the office, and we want to know, do they need the service? Do they understand the service? How can we be more accessible to them? So we're kind of excited about those projects, and I think it makes us more resilient, and hopefully if there are any gaps, we can think about how to fill those.
Those both sound really exciting, Nicholas. And perhaps I could ask Nadine if there's anything that you'd like to add in terms of really interesting or strategic direction that you're thinking about the team, or any other ideas that, just like Nicholas has presented.
No, thank you so much. I mean, I think to piggyback on what Shireen and Nicholas both said, and what Shireen said really struck a chord with me, is that self-care is critical. We are doing difficult work. People may say it's a soft skill, but it's really not what we do. So for me, I really try hard with my team to meet them where they are individually as individuals, and to support them and to encourage them to take care of themselves. I had a manager years ago who referred to staff as machines, and unfortunately, he died at the age of 53 of cancer, and we do think he worked himself to death in part. So when we have meetings, for example, when we have team meetings, we don't just launch immediately into work. We do a check to see how everyone is doing. We ask a question that's not work related to give us an opportunity to get to know each other. I check in with my team members as much as I can, individually and collectively, and I see them as individuals and not just a production assembly line. So I think it's very important that we model the behavior that we would like to see, not only from our team, but also from the institution at large. I do think people look at us, they watch us, they listen to what we say, but most of all, they listen to what we do. So I think that's very important. So I think resilience is one person at a time. And we need to take care of ourselves, whatever that looks like for you, be it meditation, be it exercise, be it, whatever you need to do. I think you should do it. And ideally, you should be part of a team that encourages you to do what you need to do in order to benefit the broader institution and our clients in particular.
I'd also like to piggyback on what Nadine just said, because resilience isn't about necessarily, from my point of view, survival mechanisms, but strengthening the discipline practices that we have. Our principles are constant, they don't change. Slowing down conversations where everything else is racing. So, the employee feels heard. Checking assumptions before they become really hardened, helping people reconnect with agency. And I think that is really because the circumstances are feeling so overwhelming, and we can help them think about a different perspective, think outside the box. So resilience for us, it's quiet and deliberative. And an organization can keep changing without losing its human bearings if we stick to our principles and we kind of slow things down a bit. So keeping the conversations grounded in our processes, deliberately reopening the question of agency and choice, I think is critical. And that's how we frame resilience in a way.
Yeah, I think sharing. That's I like that very holistic definition of resilience. And indeed, resilience is very holistic, right? It will touch on all those aspects that you highlighted. And I want to bring another aspect in the resilience, data. And we have seen in this crisis, there's a high demand for data. We have seen just now, Nicholas, the two projects, one on the strategic framework and the other one on the benchmarking. More and more goods and mediation services are challenged with data to support the organization, but on services. And I would like to ask you, Nadine, how do you see the use of data forward? With the experience you have from 2025, but even before, where do you think that the ombuds services should invest when it's coming from, when we talk about data, to support what we are doing, but also to support organization, mostly when we provide support feedback, systemic feedback, and so on?
No, thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I do think it's not lost on any of us that given the environment that we're living and working in, we have to justify our existence, right? So I think more than ever before, there is more of a focus on data to, help the organization understand what our value add is, and also to justify why we're here. So that is not lost on me. One thing that mediation services at the World Bank has done this year is we've created new KPIs, and those KPIs are being used to collect the data that is needed to answer those questions. So the KPIs are something that we've rolled out, and we have a quarterly dashboard that tracks that. We also have a benchmarking exercise that we're engaged in now to show what the dollar amount looks like when we go to mediation versus going to the more formal reviews or formal formal processes. So that's something that we're working on also. I think the challenge that we have with data is that the work that we do, it's not a hard science, right? So there are things that are intangible, but yet quite powerful, that we like changing relationships, people being happy. What does that look like? So we have to find ways to measure that. Are we looking at how many what's the absenteeism rate in the institution? Are people leaving? What is our retention rate? So these are things to look at. However, it is not an exact science, but I do believe that data is quite important. I think the challenge is not allowing the data to drive you to the point where you're no longer effective doing the work that we do, where you're more focused on closing cases than ensuring that the parties are in fact comfortable closing their case, as an example. So that's a little bit of my insight with that. I will fully confess I am not a numbers person. So, and my team knows that. That is not my strong suit. If I had to do math, I would be unemployed right now. But I do acknowledge that data is very important. It's very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadine. I want to pause here to ask colleagues from if they have any question, so before we move to next part of the discussion. Colleague, do you have any question you want to ask at this point? I don't see anybody. I hear someone, but I don't see. One time, two time, up. Dolores.
Can I piggyback on
Yes.
Nadine's data? Nadine, I'm not a numbers girl either. I do agree data is important, but the one area that we have emphasized is our systemic observations. We take great pains in developing those, giving the upward feedback. We dedicate a whole section in our annual report to systemic observations. And I think that is one of the biggest services we provide to the organization. And it is very much appreciated. And what we're trying to do is help leadership notice patterns and the risk. We're the canary in the mine and their blind spots. And hopefully these systemic observations will help develop policies that will avoid some of the issues we're raising. So yes, we all have to deal with the numbers, and we don't want to let the numbers drive us and be wet. But I think systemic observations and providing leadership with what we're seeing out of our cases and our mission visits is critical to showing the value that we provide.
Thank you, Shane. You're making that feel more good. By saying that data is not only numbers.
I know.
I'd like to add something too, if I may.
Sorry?
We're actually having a meeting this week about being more systematic about our systemic feedback and thinking about, because currently we don't have a process, and we want to be thinking about, how to identify the concerns that come up that are risks to the organization, but not only based on frequency, but thinking about, what's the magnitude of the concern, and also what are the outlying cases that may be harbingers for issues to come. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention, and this just, I think, ties in with what Shireen was just mentioning, is there's a term, I believe it's thick data, which is kind of the contour that you see in what's happening. And some of the most important conversations I think that I've had with senior leaders is serving as an interpreter for what's happening in the institution, and saying not only people are upset about X, Y, and Z, but sharing kind of the cultural context, why these things are happening, trends, and telling the story, so that somebody who may be very insulated from the hallway talk understands what's happening on the ground. And I think that those, those conversations and finding metaphors or finding ways to tell the story can be really helpful. And again, it may not be based on 17 people came to our office with this concern, but giving kind of a broader description of what's happening, so that that person can just be a bit more tuned in to
Right.
the sentiments on the ground.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Nicholas. I have Dolores and Rahel.
Okay, thank you, Josefa, for giving me the space, and congrats to the, to our speakers today. And thank you for leading this conversation, which I think is extremely important. And here is my question for the three of you. We are talking about, how the new environment, could that be geopolitical or inside of our organizations, is really informing the way that we are on bus and the challenges that we are having. So with this, I think it's super important for all of us, as a group, to come out with a speech elevator in terms of how can we present the add value, how can we reposition ourselves as ombuds, as mediators, within our organizations, and how can we prove efficiency, not just because of the data that we present, but the story is that we share, but also because of the new reality that is involving us. So, and with that, I'm very interested in listening from Nick about the proactive preventive measures that he has come out with in this time, which I think is part of this reposition of our offices as well. So I know this is the $1 million question, but I would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Is that question for Nicholas?
So, Dolores, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for the question. I'll just very briefly, I'm sure there are other thoughts on this too, but I think one of the things that's really important for me is considering, and you mentioned an elevator speech, who's the audience that I'm talking to at the moment? I know, for example, our president is very, very data driven, and very focused on business, and so I may present to him in one way about what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. When we're meeting with the employee resource groups, it may be a different approach, maybe different when talking to the head of the staff association. So thinking about what's the most important to each of these different constituencies. Another, I think, important player is our general counsel, the general counsel's office. Of course, their focus is on having mediations that are successful in resolving things before the tribunal process. So again, I think just I think you can have multiple messages for different groups, and then also thinking about how we can be collaborating for the preventative measures as well. It's really important, and that's much harder to measure than the responsive part of the work.
Thank you. Thanks. Ryan, you have a question for Shirin or Nadine?
Yeah, it was in response to what was Nadine's concern about, about the issue of reporting data, and it not just being about the numbers. And I think there's something to be said about the qualitative and the quantitative data, and using case studies or other storytelling to get points across to, be it staff or leadership. And so, like Nick, I have very data-driven CEOs. And so I do have to provide the data, and like you, I'm not in love with that whole thing, but have learned to use it effectively, I hope. But I'm finding the value of telling a story. It really does bring that little extra touch of understanding to facts and to figures. Just like that.
I completely agree with you, Rahel, and it's great to see you. And Dolores, thank you for your question. Also, I think that the more we can tell the story to share the impact, the better. But I also think it's very important to have champions, internal champions, because when you have people at the vice president level or directors who use our services and who are willing to speak on our behalf, that's a lot more golden than our gold. I hate to say it, because most people are going to look like they're tooting their own horns. So I do think finding champions and leveraging your champions strategically when it comes to your storytelling is also very important as well.
I will echo Nadine on that, because we do need people to carry our water, as they say. And when we implemented the informal first project, we had managers across the institution, high as they go, signing up as informal first champions. And I also agree with Nicholas in having your elevator speeches, but they are tailored to the groups that you're seeing. And I found at one point where I may be presenting to senior leaders, you weren't always sure how far down it got. So then I was saying, okay, where's your working level? What's that group? And how do they meet? And can we come to those meetings? So trying to get those kind of groups and talking to them to where they're on the ground, what they need to hear is sometimes a lot more effective. Like know your audience and know what they need. I think Nicholas was right on point there.
Khalid. Khalid, you are on mute.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just driving. I thought just to jump in and thank you for organizing this wonderful session. My quick question is, when people are facing difficulties, normally they get together, and that's what we do. As a community. I had experience in the last year, collaboration with our colleagues from Sufa and Sadia from the World Bank and AI.
Khalid, I think you're coming broken. I don't know if police can hear you. Can you hear Khalid?
So, sorry,
Yeah.
Maybe you can remove the video, Khalid. Just remove your video.
Oops. Try it again, Khalid.
Khalid, are you around? I think he removed the whole connection. So while Khalid is trying to connect, can we move Tina to the next question?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And I want to talk about something that has been a lot on my mind, on Anna's mind, also with Nick's team is about AI, and we're hearing it all over the place. I think it's in every news cycle. How are you all, with your respective offices, preparing for this new world that we'll be living in with AI? And how do you plan to use and integrate or not in your practice? So perhaps, Nicholas, if I could start with you, and then we could do another round robin.
Sure, sure. So, well, and as you mentioned in our office, Ana Maria has been very proactive in exploring both with Unaria, with NOMMO colleagues, and grateful to her for initiating the meeting last week with an expert internally in IDB to think about. I think that there are different ways of considering this. One is security questions around data and around anything that may be asked, what prompting AI. But the other part of it is, which I think will be a really interesting thing to see, is how people who are in conflict and they're being guided by AI systems are influenced by those systems. And so we're exploring both at this moment. I think we have just been granted a license and for using the system in our office. And again, we had a briefing around security issues and what's safe and what's not safe. And in a conversation last week with Valeria in our office, we were thinking about how some kind of a framework for ombuds and mediators would be really helpful to think about what can be done and what's maybe ethical or unethical to use. But I want to give just a very quick anecdote of something that I observed in a mediation that I conducted recently. In preparing for the mediation, one of the parties said to me, I can always tell when he uses AI for his messages to me, because it doesn't reflect anything about the way that we engage, honestly. So there's the engagement that they have, which is full of friction and tension, and then you get these messages which are lovely and worded in a way that the person would never say things. And so there was almost a scoffing tone about this, and how disingenuous it was for this person to be using AI to generate communication. So I think, it's interesting as people use it more. It'll be interesting to see what comes across as genuine or not, and if that can have an undermining effect in some ways. But it's something we're definitely interested in, and hopefully we can be collaborating as a community on this.
My turn to be muted. Thank you, Nicholas. Perhaps, Nadine, if I could pass it on to you, and we'd love to hear about what your team is doing or thinking about in this space.
Well, I will be very honest with you. I am a bit allergic to technology, but I'm learning. I am a bit of a dinosaur, but this is the direction that we're going. So I have not made any advance in this area. So this is an area I know Anna, who is on the call from my office, she has expressed an interest in AI. And what I've learned to do is to leverage my team. So I'm very open to learning through them and also looking for opportunities to learn through you all how we can leverage it. But my full confession, and I am not Catholic, is that we have not launched it yet. We're not down the road, but we are definitely aware that there are benefits to using AI. I'm curious myself how AI can be used to determine whether cases are appropriate for mediation, or to give individuals who may be afraid to go to mediation a tool that they can use just to see whether mediation is appropriate for them. So I'm kind of curious if it can be leveraged that way. Also, whether it can be leveraged with our agreement writing as we draft agreements, whether our agreements are addressing all of the issues that the parties have asked to have resolved. So I think the sky is the limit, and we just have to be open to the fact that this is the direction the world is going in, and I'm curious how it will unfold for all of us as we go forward.
Thank you, Nadine. And Shireen, you're muted.